Welcome to the Evolution Partners podcast, where I talk with the world's leading thinkers, planners, and doers who are helping to build great companies in their own way. We learn how the work they're doing is creating an impact and get to know a little bit more about them and what makes them tick. This episode is brought to you by Evolution Partners, where we help leaders to confidently build enduring great companies using our proven, structured, strategic planning process that ensures you build and execute the right plan. Check us out at evolutionpartners.com.au. Also, you can check out our books, Made to Thrive, outlining how to be a great CEO, as well as Onboarded, which is about making your new hires more effective faster. Today on the podcast, I'm joined once again by David Jenyns. Dave first appeared back in episode 10, where we explored his SYSTEMology framework, built around the idea of freeing founders from the day-to-day by systemising their business. Since then, he's worked with hundreds of companies through the System Hub and turned SYSTEMology into a global method. Now he's back with a new book, Systems Champion, and it takes things to the next level. This time, the focus isn't on building systems, it's on leading them. It's about how to install a systems champion inside your team so you, as the founder, can step back without losing control. Also, we'll talk about how AI is changing the game, making systemisation faster, easier, and more scalable than ever. Dave, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Brad, an absolute pleasure.
It's great to have you back. I think the first episode that we did, the first book, was such a great success. I guess it resonated in our audience. I got certainly quite a few comments about it. It may seem like, well, it's only just systems compared to some of perhaps the other topics that are out there, but I think that systems underpin everything. So thank you, first of all, for coming the first time and coming back. So since SYSTEMology came out, I mean, it was over a year ago when we spoke. How do you think that about systemising a business? How do you think that has evolved in your mind from the original concept, if at all, A? And then how does Systems Champion, what is the book and the concept overall, and how does that build on the work?
So Systems Champion, I suppose, really was birthed out of working with a lot of businesses to implement systemology into their business. So it was great to kind of see, well, where do people get stuck? Where do they need some extra help? And what are some of the biggest breakthroughs that they had? And what's the difference between those that build a successful systemized business and those that don't? And one of the biggest leverage points I identified was this idea of the systems champion, and that the business owner, as we know, is very busy. They often appreciate and value systems, but they don't necessarily have the time to get behind it, roll up their sleeves, and actually do the work. Maybe they can do a little bit. It's a little bit stop and start, and there's a lot of baggage that they carry around systemization, and it's oftentimes not the best use of their time. So the idea of Systems Champion was, well, let's write a book for the business owner to first identify that person and empower them, and then give almost like an instruction manual to the Systems Champion on how do we build a systems culture? How do we get the team on board? How can we leverage tools to move even quicker? In the Systemology book, it was a very linear journey that someone went through, that I led them through, whereas systemization, in reality, it isn't always linear. Every business is a bit different. Every team is a little bit different. They've got different challenges and sticking points. So I wanted to give more of a framework to think about, well, why don't team members follow process? And what can the systems champion do to really take away the excuses and make it less possible for someone to say, oh, I didn't know how to do that particular task, or I didn't know it was my job, or I didn't know that you wanted it done this particular way, or, I don't want to. Like, these are common excuses that often come up around systemization. So I thought, how can I really package something up as a set of tools that the systems champion can use to roll it out? And I know we'll kind of explore a little bit more around AI, because really the idea of systems champion was with me probably a good few years ago when I started working on some of these concepts and piecing it together. And then we obviously had this huge AI revolution that's got me to completely rethink how we approach systemization.
How has that changed? How has AI changed the way that you think about systemization? And maybe just begin by, in case we've got a new listener, hopefully we've got more than one new listener since you were first on, maybe just explain in a synopsis style or an overview of the systemology book and concept, and then how has AI changed that?
So systemology is a 7-stage framework to go from I don't have any systems or processes in my business to I've got a minimum set of systems just that ensure the most important tasks are done to a particular standard. So it's not really like process improvement, because a lot of process improvement methodologies pre-assume you have a process, whereas a lot of small business hasn't yet identified or captured their process. So the 7 stages, it's define, which is just about identifying what processes you're going to capture. And then there's step 2, which is assign, figure out whom on the team knows how to do those tasks already to a great standard, and let's kind of capture that and make it a new baseline. Step number 3 is extracting, which is how do we then get it out of the heads of those key team members. Then we organize. That means we put it into a central location and make it easily accessible and never more than one click away from when the team member needs it. Then we look at integrate, and integrate is about getting the team on board and how do we ensure that they buy into this idea. And then we have scale, where we start to look at, in step number 1, we just identified 5 or 10 systems to get started, whereas scale, we start to think about all of the departments in business, HR and finance and management. So we start to look at what systems are required for scale. And then finally, step number 7 is optimize. And that's where we go, okay, well, we've captured what we're currently doing. How can we improve it? So they're the 7 stages. Probably the biggest sticking point in the process prior to AI was that extraction phase. And more specifically, it was the actual documentation piece. We talk about a few things like, well, let's just record you doing the task getting done. That might be through a screen recording, or maybe you record it on your phone. And then typically the systems champion would go away and do the documentation and come back to the knowledgeable worker and say, hey, I've drafted up this process for you to review. Now, with AI, that biggest friction point and the bit that often derailed and slowed things down, because everybody would start with gusto and then you'd get into the guts of doing the work, and then it was easy for other priorities to creep in. Now we can take those video recordings, get them transcribed, feed it into ChatGPT or whatever AI you're using, and then just say, hey, can you draft this process for me? And very quickly, you get a fantastic version number 1. So that already kind of just speeds up the process. Like it would take, oftentimes we'd allocate 3 months just to get the core 10 to 15 systems down. Now that can be done in a week, oftentimes with some focused effort. And then kind of moving beyond that, we work towards what's called minimum viable systems, where systems touch all departments in the business. And equally, that can be accomplished a lot quicker. And then probably the last big change we see is in the final stage, which is optimization. Now, optimization, there's just very little tweaks, low-hanging fruit that can be made by looking at a process and then going, oh, step number 3, we can pre-write a prompt and set up a custom GPT where we just plug step number 3 straight into AI and have it draft the email or do the proposal or whatever. And then the human steps in, reviews it before sending it off. So the actual optimization piece, there's some incredible quick wins just by leveraging some of these tools. So we're seeing some extraordinary wins and starting to realize that the systems champion has the best visibility to understand and spot these opportunities also, because they're dealing with process and they understand how the business works and how things integrate, and they start using some of the tools for documentation. It's a very easy next step for them to go, oh, we should tweak this process and get some extraordinary wins.
Nice. Yeah, they are extraordinary, changing the timing in that sense. So you've said that the systems champion shouldn't be the business owner. So what makes a great systems champion, and how can you know if you've got one internally already?
A great systems champion has a handful of qualities that are just natural and don't need to be changed. Do you know those people who just organize things or create checklists? They often just do it at home. Everything, like, they just naturally are that way. That's one of those qualities. Another big one, and probably what disqualifies the business owner, is they've got to have some capacity, because systems and process are always important, but they're never urgent. So for the business owner, they never get to it. But for the systems champion, if they've got that capacity, sometimes they can have a shared role. Maybe it's an administrative assistant or someone in HR, or maybe it's dedicated depending on the size of the organization. But they're oftentimes some qualities when you think about the operations manager. Imagine like a very junior operations manager, and you think a great operations manager will often complement where the business owner is weak. The business owner might be this visionary, quick moving type person who has these big ideas, and the operations manager really drives the team, gets things done. And we've had some great examples of junior team members become systems champions. And if you spot the qualities right, they grow into these great operations managers because they're learning how the business works across departments and the way that things integrate. So a lot of the qualities you would think, great communication and some potential for leadership skills and, attention to detail. I mean, I did a Colby score as well for some great systems champions I worked with, and you're looking for really people with they're the detail oriented with high follow through. You want someone who kind of really loves to complete things.
Yeah, nice. I think that's a good explanation of what is a systems champion and how to spot one. I love it. They're just naturally organized. That's a great place to start, because then they're going to enjoy the work, right? You speak about the business systems hierarchy, and it offers a clear roadmap to help to understand what to systemize and in what order. Could you walk us through that model and how leaders can use it to avoid overwhelm? Because I imagine that overwhelm is something that could be quite present, where people would think, I want to do everything all at once.
Yes. So there's two tools. The first tool I talked about in Systemology, and then the second tool in Systems Champion. And there's a little bit of a tweak when you combine the two together. So the first tool, the critical client flow, really you just focus on how does the business end up delivering value. And you describe the linear journey that the prospect and the client goes through to deliver a core product or service. So you think, how do we get their attention? How do we handle their inquiry? What does the sales process look like? How do we onboard them and deliver and get them to come back? That's where we start. And sometimes I even go the step beyond and I say, where within that critical client flow is the pain? Where is something breaking down in the organization, or it's heavily dependent on a team member, where we say, if we got 10 times the amount of prospects and clients through, what breaks first? That's a great place to start. And then we move into what's called minimum viable systems. That's really the main milestone you have to get to, which is really just if you imagine the business like the human body, that's a metaphor that I use a little bit, which is this idea, well, for the human body to be healthy, all of the systems in the human body need to be functioning. Respiratory, skeletal, cardiovascular. And if one of those systems fails and doesn't deliver what that system needs to the body, it can either make the human body very unhealthy, or it can kill you as well if one completely fails. Equally in business, there are these subsystems: marketing, sales, operations, finance, etc. Each department has a specific responsibility to the business. So marketing needs to generate leads. Sales is to convert those leads. Operations or client fulfillment is to deliver the products and services. So each department has a responsibility to the business. And we look for what would be, if we applied the 80-20 rule, what are the most important systems in each of those departments to ensure that the most important things that need to happen for that department to deliver on its responsibility to the business. And it's just an exercise we go through that thinking, and that really helps to surface, probably anywhere between 30 and 40 really critical systems for the business. And that's what we work towards. Sometimes just leaning into where the pain is. It's always, we use that as a starting point, and then we kind of really go, ooh, what's not working? Like if, there's no point in re-engineering your recruitment or your onboarding process if you go, I'm not recruiting someone for the next 6 to 12 months. But if you go, I know we're going to be recruiting someone soon, well, onboarding is probably one of the most important systems you need to be working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So you make the claim that documentation is not systemization, which I find really, really interesting. What do you think that small to mid-sized companies, which is probably the target audience perhaps, what do you think that they misunderstand when they look to documentation, and how do you reframe that?
Oftentimes documentation, and I mentioned it in the book, it's almost like a documented habit. So your team members do things a certain way and they're just habits for them. Like they might be doing something and have done it for a very long time, so they're just used to it. All documentation really is doing is calling out, hey, here is the habit that we would like you to follow. And for brand new team members when they're coming on board, and that's why we connected and why I love your work so much, the easiest time to plant those habits are when someone's coming on board and you're saying, this is how we do things here. And when a habit forms, it's much harder to shake, and that's just how we do things here. Whereas for existing team members, we use the documentation to show them a better habit and a way, and then we need to remind them oftentimes at the start while we're retraining, hey, to follow the process. And then over a period of time, if you stick with it long enough, that new habit takes over the old habit, and then this is how we do things here. So that's what I think about with regards to documentation. And I mean, to a certain extent, in the book, I open saying a lot of people have different phrases. Whenever you think about systemization, there's SOPs and workflows and standard operating procedures and how-to documents and flowcharts. And there's all this different terminology. So I just try and simplify it down to the word systems. And really all I'm talking about is it's a series of steps that when you follow them, that can produce a consistent outcome. So we're just finding what is your intellectual IP. Most businesses, they have collected over the years so much knowledge that's trapped inside of the heads of the team members for just little tweaks, and this is how we run this particular process or do this particular thing. And the risk is obviously every night that your most valuable IP, which is how you do what you do, walks out the door every single night. And that's, a risky proposition when you think about it. What happens if they don't come back? What happens if they get sick? What happens if the family member gets sick? What happens? So really a big part of what we're doing is capturing what works, capturing those positive habits to make them repeatable and transferable.
Nice. And you break systemization into 3 phases: the implementation, the optimization, and then the scale. Where do you think that companies stall or get stuck, and what do you think that is?
One of the biggest ones is they actually try to start with optimization. This happens a lot, especially when the business owner tries to drive it, because visionaries can't help themselves and want to create things the way that they would like them to be, not the way that they are, and which means they want to get it just right, and they want to go, oh no, this is the way that we should do things. But then it ends up becoming a huge blocker and stalling point because, well, now we've just bottlenecked it to the business owner who doesn't have enough time, and we need them to design these processes. So oftentimes some tremendous wins can be gained just by making things repeatable, which then often means you can delegate the tasks down to less skilled, typically lower cost team members, and sometimes even machines, and getting automation and AI involved, which then frees up the space of the more skilled team members, which then allows them to do proper re-engineering and things like that. So the first step really is capture what you're doing, making it repeatable, even if it's not world class, even if it's not where you want it to be. Just that alone can create the space to then start to allow the business owner to work on it rather than in it. Systemology is all about, we need to get the business owner out of those operations first, and then they can work on much higher value tasks.
You touched again on AI. How has that changed over the time that you've been writing this book? Because I think we both know that writing a book doesn't happen in a week. I heard something yesterday that if you type a prompt into, I'll use ChatGPT as the example, and then you get the answer, and then you type the same prompt back in, you'll get a different answer because that's how fast it's learning.
Yeah.
Within that context of speed, how's your journey been through writing the book and understanding more about AI? Because I know whilst there's AI within this book and you talk about how to utilize it, I know that you also have done quite a lot of that in your consulting practice as well and with your teams. And so how has AI informed the way that you've worked on and thought about the systems champion throughout this book?
I definitely had my moment where I was questioning the future of business and what importance will process play in the future. And the more that I tested it and thought it and had different discussions and experiments with the team, I've come to the conclusion that process is only becoming more important because the AI still needs to be told what to be done. Like a prompt is effectively an instruction. So where a lot of people go wrong in business is they're shooting in many different directions. They're jumping from one thing to the next. And the real key is to know, what are those core tasks? What is the outcome that we need? What are the steps? And whether a human's completing it or the AI is completing it, we still need to get very clear on what that looks like so that it can be programmed in. So now I'm realizing, and that's where I'm starting to see this merge between the systems champion and AI champion, because I'm like, you need to figure this out. Probably it's never been more important than right now because of the speed that's happening. And we're going to have a scenario very shortly where there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of businesses that are going to have their blockbuster or Kodak moment where they failed to adopt this technology and embrace it, but their competitors do, and then they go out of business because their competitors are just that much more efficient. So I'm kind of really saying you've got to understand what you are doing and what your core processes are so that you can then start to go to some of these technologies and then ask the question, and how does ChatGPT or whatever it is allow me to do this faster, cheaper, and better than ever before? A lot of people get stuck in this deer in headlights thinking, look at all of these things AI can do. When really, if you just focus on what you're doing and then get it to improve upon that, that's the way that you win with AI.
Yeah. So where do you think the line in the sand sits at this moment where AI should be used or human judgment is essential?
I still do a lot of human in the loop. So I still feel like, I mean, I've got a great client. She lives in Mornington, so a few suburbs away from me, and she runs an accounting firm. And she's quite forward thinking, very process driven background, working as a McDonald's person. So she'd had systems programmed into her thinking from day one. And just like many accountants, she'd offshored a lot of her back office staff. You know, you hear about accountants moving over to either India or the Philippines, and they get team members that end up helping to do some of the back office stuff. She's really finding this is changing now. She wants higher quality, higher caliber people onshore that then leverage AI tools. And by using the AI tools, she's able to get more out of them, which means she can pay them more and she gets a proper ROI. Now, I don't know how long that lasts before, you know, everybody starts adopting these things, but there is an opportunity here. She's, instead of going offshore, she's bringing it all back onshore and viewing AI more like an Iron Man suit, where it just makes the human in the middle more valuable and able to do so much more because they leverage the AI tools, not necessarily replace the human.
Yeah, an enhanced version of yourself. But I agree, there's still a lot of resistance that we're seeing. We're doing everything that we can to get our clients to fully adopt AI and to fully embrace it and to use it as a thought partner, someone who helps them to do better thinking, because we can definitely see there is some challenging times ahead for those who don't do that. And we said it's not going to be any of our clients, that's for sure. So you make an interesting statement saying that if you're the systems champion and you're creating the systems, you're doing it wrong. Can you unpack that paradox for me?
Really centers around the idea of the business owner not having capacity, not being the right person wired to do it, and that's okay. I remember doing some work, I talked about it in the book SYSTEMology, with Michael Gerber, and I mean, he's the author of the E-Myth, and many of the catchphrases we all know work on it rather than in it came from him, so seen as the godfather of business systems. And I remember working closely with him thinking, you are the least systems guy I know. You are this bold, creative visionary who thinks of the future and then lobs it to the team and says, okay, you go figure it out. And he's just an ideas guy. So he's not documenting the process. He doesn't even hardly follow the process. Like, he is a classic, untamed horse that, just goes off, and his team kind of really pick everything up. And it just made me realize that that's very natural, and it's just a really clear signal, if you're not a systems person, that you should make sure that you surround yourself with systems driven people, because we all agree, and I don't think I've ever had a discussion with a business owner where we haven't said this, that systems driven businesses aren't better businesses. They're better for clients, they're better for staff, they're better for suppliers, they're better for the bottom line, they're better for the business owner, so they're better all around. And business owners know this, even if they don't see themselves as great systems people. So if we know that, and you can't build the business of your dreams without great process, because there's no real way to ensure your standards are completed the way that you would like it without defining what those standards are, then if you're not great at it, you've got to find great people that will follow your or the way that you want things done and will help to roll this out. It's more critical than ever for people who don't see themselves as process people. So that's one of the big reasons I just keep on harping on this idea. Look, I have seen it change over time. Once a systems champion comes in, once they get the core processes, once the business is functioning and the business owner steps out of the operations, then when the business owner actually does their best work is problem solving, and it is re-engineering process, going, that bit of the business is not working. Okay, well, let's pull that out of the machine, go to work on it, make it even better, and insert it back in. Yeah. But that has to happen, 3 or 4 moves down the line once we get at least the foundations in place.
And so what about resistance? How do you get buy-in from a team that sees, even if you've got a systems champion, how do you recommend people deal with resistance to change if they view systems as being excessive admin or curbing creativity?
Yeah. So there's a whole range of ways to make it work. As far as the first thing that you want to do is build up proof in the organization. So you want to try and start to demonstrate that you're a systems-driven business and this is the way that we do things here, and you talk about it on team meetings and you celebrate system wins and you share new process. So that's part of it. And then we also want to remove some of the common excuses. So I didn't know how. Well, if you get some documented process down, well, they can't say that anymore because you go, well, here's how, and I've outlined it. The other one is I didn't know it was my job. So that is just making sure it's very clear who is doing what by when. That's a project management or task management system. And then the last bit, the most challenging bit, is I don't want to. That resistance typically happens with your existing team, because new team members, you work through your material, you build up a great onboarding system, and it doesn't typically become a problem with new employees because you've recruited and onboarded really well. So then you're just down to those last few, which may be resisting. And as you're changing culture, that sometimes happens where Some people don't fit in. And it's that classic thing that the team that maybe got you to where you are today might not be the team that will take you through to that next level. I mean, we try and support them and help team members make the jump, but we implement what's called the system for unfollowed systems, which is just what do you do when someone doesn't follow process, and you give them every opportunity, and how do you escalate, and how do you avoid what most business owners do, which is for long-standing team members, they'll just give them another chance. Okay, look, and it's forever, one more chance, one more, can't let go of them, they know how to do all of these things, which then sends a very clear signal to the rest of the team that, hey, we're not really that serious about process. So that's the most challenging bit.
Wow. You've worked with a lot of businesses through yourself and your team over time. What's the payoff? What's the return on investment when someone improves their business? I'll say on average, because there's always the outliers, but on average, someone works through the first book and the second book, let's say now. What do people get when they implement a fully systemized business in the way that you advocate?
It's oftentimes all we're talking about is capturing what works and making it repeatable. So the wins I've had vary dramatically and in lots of different areas. Companies going from 8% net profit through to 30% net profit within sort of that 9-month period. I've seen that accountant I was talking about that was up the road, just one of the tasks that she documented, and then she actually shifted over to some of the AI. She ended up saving 1,000 work hours over the course of a year just on one task, because she set up some automation that was logging into the ATO portal and then running some crawls that a human used to do and then reporting that back into a spreadsheet. And then everything from exits. I had a doggy daycare company where the lady ended up selling to pet stock and had a tremendous multi-7-figure exit. Had a builder out of Adelaide, Ryan Stannard from Stannard Homes, and his daughter, the systems champion, Erin. I talk about that one in the book. He ended up taking a 7-week vacation over holidays, got a caravan and went away from the business, which for most tradespeople, if you're off the tools, your business is not making money. Whereas he was able to take the time off and the team continued to function and complete jobs when he wasn't around. And that one's hard to quantify. Like there's wins there that don't necessarily show up on the bottom line when it comes to taking a holiday, let alone reduced time. I even had one guy, Gary McMahon, tell me that SYSTEMology probably saved his marriage because he was just getting all consumed by the business and wasn't able to break free. So oftentimes now we're getting better at when someone comes on board, we ask them, what is it that you're looking to achieve? Because systems really is just a vehicle to get to the outcome, depending on what it is that you're focusing on.
Thank you. It sounds very rewarding. Tell me, what is a better business? What does a better business look like to you? How would you describe a better business for you and most of the people that you deal with?
A better business really comes down to having the freedom to choose as the business owner how and what you work on. So I used to think, oh yes, people, some people want to go lie on a beach somewhere and, do nothing. Whereas a lot of business owners, they enjoy work when they're working on things that they enjoy. And it's oftentimes when you're stuck in the day-to-day and you don't have the choice, and if you're not working, you're not making money, and you're solving the same problems over and over and over that you've solved hundreds of times before. You're answering the same customer questions, you're answering the same staff questions, and you're stuck in this rut and this trap, and you feel like, that's just business, that's just the way it is. I feel like that's not why business owners get into business. They get into business for freedom, and then typically they have anything but freedom. They have the complete opposite of that. So a better business for me is, I don't care if you want to work 4 hours a week or if you want to work 80. It's really up to the business owner, but they should have the freedom to choose. That's really what I think a better business is, where the business owner can make the choice and the business works for them rather than them working for the business.
Brilliant, and very aligned with the book we spoke about before that I'm writing and my thinking as well. That's great. What book would you recommend for our audience?
One that I've just finished reading. Everybody should check it out. Alan Dibb's got his new book out, Lean Marketing. It just really distills down. What I love is there's so many things you can be doing in business, and the same with marketing. And Alan just talks about going, what are the essential bits? Do less things in marketing, but do the bits that you do really well. And that kind of really resonates with our systems approach. We kind of extrapolate that into all parts of business. So that's Lean Marketing by Alan Dibb.
Lean Marketing, Alan Dibb. We'll put that in the show notes. Of course, his first book was The One-Page Marketing Plan, and this is really the follow-on to that. So thank you. How can people learn more about you and your business?
Yeah, best place, just head over to Amazon. If you're listening to this is an Audible version, start with Systemology and move on to Systems Champion after that. And then if you want to find out a little bit more or follow the rabbit hole, just go to systemology.com, and then there's links to the social media and extra resources to kind of help you on your journey.
We'll put those in the show notes as well. What haven't we discussed that you wanted to cover off today?
Perhaps the last story I'd like to share would be my moment that really got me to kick into gear, which was having to lay off 7 staff last year. And it was straight off the back of ChatGPT coming out. As soon as I saw it came out, then I couldn't not share it with our systemologists who help business owners deploy some systemology in their business. And we had built up a really great service for the systemologist where we would do the documentation for the systemologist. They'd meet with the client, record tasks getting done, they'd send them in, we'd do the documentation, and straight after ChatGPT, I shared it with systemologists, and within a few months, that whole business dried up. No one wanted us to do the documentation when they could go to ChatGPT and get it at the speed of AI and to a really good standard, and then the systemologist would do the polish after that. So yeah, that was tough for us. I tried to replace some of the staff and put them in other roles. Obviously, we were very clearly over capacity, so I had to let go some of the staff on that team, and that's really where I kind of started to question where things are going. Certain industries are impacted quicker than others, but the reality is AI is here, the genie is out of the bottle, this is only going to accelerate, so you need to move quickly on this and start to think about how you leverage some of these tools. I think that's, just a bit of a sense of urgency. That's because you don't know. Like for me, that part of the business just dried up within a few months. And that was pretty scary as a business owner. Like, we're systems driven, we're strong, we're great at what we do, but as a business owner, that's your job to see what's coming down the pipe, how can you best position to continue to add great value through to your clients, and that's how you stay ahead of the curve and you don't turn into a Blockbuster or a Kodak. So that's probably maybe just a little bit of fear to get you moving. You've got to do this. Get excited by it. There's tremendous opportunity here too, as well, on the flip side, for those that embrace this.
There is, and opportunity in terms of strategy as well. So many times we've worked with teams who have unlocked strategic ideas that they never would have come up with in the room. So it's a big and important tool. Well, Dave, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. It's been a fascinating chat, digging into the Systems Champion concept. I always enjoy our chats, and today was no exception. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review for the podcast, that'd be really helpful to other like-minded entrepreneurs, and then we can grow our community. If you want to find out more about our guests, head over to evolutionpartners.com.au/podcast, where you can find show notes and other additional reading. Hope to see you back next week. Until then, keep thriving.